Welcome to a journey into the unknown, where the familiar halls of college campuses transform into places of dread and mystery. In this video, we'll uncover 3 chilling stories that took place in the very institutions meant to nurture young minds. These tales of terror and unexplained phenomena will make you question what really goes on behind closed doors after dark. From disappearing students to cursed theaters, prepare yourself for a nightmarish dive into the supernatural. Story 1. The Disappearing Dorm Mate. It was the first semester of college, and Emily was excited to start her new life away from home. She moved into a small dorm room with a girl named Sarah. Sarah was quiet and kept to herself, but she seemed nice enough. They didn't talk much, but Emily was okay with that. She was busy with her classes and making new friends. A few weeks into the semester, Emily noticed that Sarah was acting strange. She would stare out the window for hours, muttering to herself. Sometimes, Emily would wake up in the middle of the night and see Sarah standing by the door, just staring at it. Emily tried to ask Sarah if everything was okay, but Sarah would just nod and go back to her bed without saying a word. One night, Emily came back to the dorm after studying late in the library. As she walked down the hall, she noticed the lights in her room were off, but there was a strange glow coming from under the door. When she opened it, she saw Sarah sitting on the floor, surrounded by candles. In the center of the circle of candles was a small mirror. Sarah was chanting something under her breath, her eyes fixed on the mirror. Emily was freaked out and asked Sarah what she was doing. Sarah looked up at her with wide, terrified eyes and whispered, "It's coming for me." Before Emily could ask what she meant, Sarah blew out the candles and crawled into bed, pulling the covers over her head. The next morning, Sarah was gone. Her bed was neatly made, and all of her belongings were gone. Emily asked around, but no one had seen Sarah leave. The dorm's security footage showed Sarah walking out of the building around midnight, but after that, she seemed to vanish. Her phone was found in the hallway, but there were no other clues. The college launched a search, but Sarah was never found. Her disappearance remained a mystery. Emily tried to move on, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened to Sarah. She started having nightmares about the night she saw Sarah with the mirror. One night, Emily woke up to the sound of someone whispering her name. She sat up in bed and looked around, but no one was there. The room was empty. But then she noticed something on her desk. The small mirror Sarah had been using. It hadn't been there before. As she stared at the mirror, a cold dread settled over her. She reached out to pick it up, but before she could touch it, the whispering started again, louder this time. It was Sarah's voice, but it was filled with fear and desperation. "It's coming for you," the voice said. The next morning, Emily's roommate found her bed empty. Emily had vanished, just like Sarah. The only thing left behind was the mirror, sitting on her desk, reflecting nothing but darkness. Story 2. The Haunted Classroom. St. James College was an old institution with a rich history. The buildings were ancient, and the walls seemed to hold the secrets of centuries. But there was one classroom in particular that everyone avoided, room 309. In the old humanities building. It was said to be haunted, though no one could say exactly why. Some claimed they had seen strange shadows moving in the room, while others heard faint whispers when no one was around. Despite the rumors, Professor Williams insisted on holding his late-night lectures in room 309. He was a skeptic and didn't believe in ghosts. For him, the room was just another classroom, albeit a bit colder than the others. One night, the professor decided to stay late to grade papers. He was alone in the building, but he liked the solitude. As he worked, The old clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the passage of time. It was almost midnight when the room suddenly grew even colder. The lights flickered, and the professor shivered, pulling his jacket tighter around himself. He tried to focus on his work, but then he heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible. He looked up from his papers, scanning the room, but it was empty. The whispering continued, growing louder, but he couldn't make out the words. It was as if multiple voices were speaking all at once, overlapping and incoherent. Unease settled in his stomach, but he shook it off and went back to grading. But the whispering wouldn't stop. It was getting louder, more insistent. The professor's hands began to tremble, and he could no longer concentrate. He stood up and decided to leave, but as he reached for the door, it slammed shut on its own. The professor froze, his heart pounding. He tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic started to set in as the whispering turned into a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once, filling the room with their unintelligible chatter. He could feel a presence in the room with him, something cold and malevolent. Suddenly the room fell silent, and the lights flickered out. The professor was plunged into darkness. He fumbled for his phone, desperate for light. But when he turned it on, the screen was filled with static. And then, just as suddenly as it had stopped, the whispering started again, louder and more aggressive. The professor backed away from the door, but he stumbled over something on the floor. When he looked down, he saw that it was a student's notebook, but he had no idea how it had gotten there. He picked it up, and as he did, the whispering stopped again. He opened the notebook, hoping to find some explanation, but the pages were blank. Confused and scared, he flipped through the notebook, and then he saw it. A single page with the words, "Help me," scrawled across it in large, shaky letters. Below it was a date from 10 years ago. The professor dropped the notebook, his hands shaking. The room was freezing now, and he could see his breath in the air. The lights flickered back on, and for a moment he thought he saw a shadowy figure standing at the front of the classroom, where he usually lectured. But when he blinked, it was gone. He didn't waste any more time. He ran to the door and, with a final burst of strength, managed to wrench it open. He didn't stop running until he was out of the building and into the cold night air. The next day, he tried to tell the administration what had happened, but they brushed it off, insisting that room 309 was just a normal classroom. But the professor knew better. He never set foot in that room again, and eventually he left the college altogether, unable to shake the feeling that something in that room was still watching him, waiting for its next victim. Story 3. The Curse of the Theater Club. Westwood College had a small but passionate theater club. Every year they would put on a play, and it was a tradition that everyone looked forward to. But there was one year when things went horribly wrong, and the club never recovered. The club had decided to put on a production of Macbeth. Despite the superstition that the play was cursed, they laughed off the warnings, eager to prove that they weren't afraid of some old legend. But as they began rehearsing, strange things started happening. Props would go missing, lights would flicker on and off, and there were strange noises backstage when no one was there. At first, they thought it was just someone playing pranks, but the incidents grew more sinister. One night, during a late rehearsal, the lead actress, Lily, was practicing her lines on stage when the lights suddenly went out. The theater was plunged into darkness, and the crew scrambled to find flashlights. When the lights came back on, Lily was gone. They searched the entire theater, but there was no sign of her. Her phone and belongings were still in the dressing room, but she had vanished. The police were called, and a search was conducted, but Lily was never found. The club was devastated, but they decided to continue with the play in her honor. But as the opening night approached, the strange occurrences only intensified. The understudy who took over Lily's role began complaining of feeling watched, and one night she was found in her dressing room, unconscious and with strange bruises on her neck. She couldn't remember what had happened, but she was too terrified to continue with the play. The director decided to cancel the production, but the curse had already taken its toll. The theater club disbanded, and the members all went their separate ways, but none of them ever forgot what happened. Some claimed to have seen Lily's ghost wandering the halls of the theater, her face pale and her eyes wide with terror. Others said they could still hear her voice, echoing through the empty theater at night, repeating her final lines from Macbeth. Years later, the theater was renovated, and the new students knew nothing of the curse. But those who had been there still remembered the horror that had unfolded, and the price they had paid for defying the curse. And in the dark corners of the theater, the ghost of Lily still lingered, a tragic reminder of a play that was never meant to be performed. If you enjoyed these terrifying tales and want to hear more spine-chilling stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Join our community of mystery enthusiasts as we explore the darkest corners of the world, where the truth is often more frightening than fiction.